news comes first. This is ABC-7 Extra.
Welcome to ABC-7 Extra. Happy Sunday evening, El Paso, Las Cruces, and Ciudad Juarez. I'm Paul Cicala. For the next half hour, we'll be chatting extensively with the Democrat candidates for the El Paso County Sheriff. As everybody knows, Richard Wiles has been the sheriff of El Paso County since 2009, and he's decided not to run for re-election. And Sheriff Wiles is retiring after 40 years in law enforcement. And since on the Republican side of the coin, Minerva Torres Shelton is the only candidate, we'll hold off until closer to November to chat with her once we know where things stand on the crowded Democrat side. And El Paso voters are now taking part in the Democratic and Republican primary elections. This will determine the candidates that will move forward to the November general election. Now it's your voice and your vote. Democrat voters will choose their nominee for the El Paso County Sheriff to compete against unopposed Republican, as mentioned, Minerva Torres Shelton, as we just talked about. Now, those Democrat candidates are Raul Mendiola, Robert Bobby Flores, Ryan Urrutia, Oscar Ugarte, and Michael P. Gonzalez. Now, all the Democrat candidates are present this evening, with the exception of Constable Oscar Ugarte. He was unable to make it, and the campaign for Team Oscar responded to my invitation to this forum by saying, quote, "We appreciate you extending an invitation, but with early voting starting, Oscar is focusing his energy on speaking to voters at the polls and knocking on doors." And since he's not here, we'll provide you this statement that Oscar Ugarte's campaign emailed me earlier in the morning. "If elected as county sheriff, my major goals include the creation of a civilian social services unit which will provide resources to members of our community, regardless of their circumstances, addressing ongoing crimes such as gun violence and drunk driving through collaboration with the regional law enforcement agencies, expanding the crisis intervention team, enhancing the level of training deputies receive, engaging more with our youth, and ensuring a level of transparency and accountability that the community deserves. Furthermore, being the sole candidate with a previous election win and the responsibility of leading a county law enforcement office, voters can rely on my commitment to responsible fiscal management. I commit to actively seeking state and federal grants to alleviate the tax burden, showcasing a responsible approach to managing the public's tax dollars." All right, now let's focus on the guests that we do have this evening. In order to be fair, we will ask each candidate the same question, and they'll have the same time to answer those questions. We'll go one by one, and we want to remind our candidates once again that we'll limit your answers to around 30 to 40 seconds each to keep things moving along smoothly. So let's begin with Raul Mendiola. He is a retired El Paso police officer and is currently an Isleta Independent School District security officer. And let's start off with the obvious question. What do you hope to achieve as sheriff? What would be some of the biggest problems you'd want to fix? And a reminder once again to please limit the response to about 30 to 40 seconds.
I want to increase the services to the community. I want to provide officers around all school campuses. There's 240 school campuses. The security of our students, administrators, teachers, and the parents need to be protected. And I also want to increase the patrol service so we have more service for the people in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Mendiola. And the next candidate, Robert Bobby Flores, is a retired El Paso County Sheriff Assistant Chief. Welcome, my friend. And Mr. Flores, describe to El Pasoans watching this what your major goals would be as sheriff of this great county.
So again, my platform is very simple. I want to provide a quality public service approach to our community and ensure that especially the areas east of El Paso that have grown so much, that they have adequate police protection and investigative follow-up. There are some problems that need to be addressed in the jails. I do have that experience, having run the jail division, the annex division, which is the biggest division of the sheriff's office, twice in my career. And we need to get that under control, and we need to get our compliance back with the Texas Commission on Jail Standards.
And we'll talk about the jail situation in a bit later in the show. Next, we have Ryan Urrutia. Urrutia is a commander with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. And Commander Urrutia, describe why you're running and what you hope to bring to the table if elected as the El Paso County Sheriff.
Well, Paul, you know, I've been involved with law enforcement for 28 years. Continuing community service and community policing is very important to assure trust is between the community and the citizens of El Paso. And I've done that for several years as a lieutenant and as your patrol commander, being involved with veterans, our community advocacy groups, as well as neighborhood associations, making sure they know who we are and have services they can rely on. But I've also the only candidate that has expanded resources to our community, bringing on crisis intervention teams, expanding school resource officer programs. Those programs free up patrol deputies so they don't have to respond to mental health calls, so they don't have to respond to schools, and gives them the ability to be on the streets keeping our community safe.
Thank you, Commander Urrutia. And now let's take the time to chat with Michael P. Gonzalez. Gonzalez is currently a police officer at the El Paso Independent School District and is a retired El Paso County Sheriff's Office Sergeant. And Mr. Gonzalez, please tell us what your major goals would be if elected as the El Paso County Sheriff and what you might fix as well.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to have me here. It's time to develop programs. It's time to be there for the people. It's time for us to organize together as one. I believe that the community comes first. We need to have our officers out there more on patrol, more on foot patrol, meeting with businesses, meeting with stakeholders, meeting with people that are important to us. That's the voters. I think that the people are the ones that are the most forgotten. I think they're the ones that we need to work the hardest for. I think all of us together creating organizations, on developing programs. When I was with the Sheriff's Department, I had my hands in almost everything. So I was able to develop a lot of things while I was there, and I think we need to continue to do that. We need to continue to grow as an agency. We need to continue to grow on the things that we've already developed.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, and thanks to all the law enforcement on this panel. And a reminder, you're watching ABC-7 Extra, and still ahead, we will ask the sheriff candidates what they do to ensure inmate safety and, of course, the safety of correction officers as well, especially after the murder of an inmate in November in which he was attacked for 45 minutes without a response. That and more after the break. I'm Paso County, and you're watching ABC-7 Sunday Extra. We'll be right back.
The hot, crispy filet of fish with soft steamed buns, tender, flaky fish, melty cheese, and tangy tartar sauce. You either love it or you haven't tried it yet.
Hook 2 filet of fish on the line for $7. And don't let them get away. It's a deal you'll want to keep.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
The President's Day Parade of Savings is marching all month long at Oscar Leaser's Hyundai of El Paso. With new 2024 Elantras, only $199 a month. New Sonatas or Santa Fe's, your choice, only $289 a month. And the luxury full-size Palisade, only $379 a month. But the presidential savings don't stop there. All new Hyundais have 0 down and 0 maintenance for 3 years. Don't miss the President's Day Parade of Savings all month long at Oscar Leaser's Hyundai of El Paso.
I'm Colin Allred, and in Texas, we believe in freedom, keeping government out of our personal lives. But our state's extreme abortion ban lets politicians, like Ted Cruz, decide what care women get, not their doctors. My wife and I have been blessed with 2 beautiful baby boys. It's outrageous that she could have been denied treatment in an emergency. As your senator, I'll keep fighting to protect women's access to abortion. I'm Colin Allred, and I approve this message because it's time to bring freedom back to Texas.
There's no better feeling than your mind being at peace.
But getting there can often feel impossible.
Simply because we allow stress to overwhelm us.
Never realizing that our mental health
is connected to our physical health,
which leads to the decay of our spirit.
When you believe in yourself, you're letting your body know that your mind is at peace.
So you behave in a way that creates positive change.
And you become the best version of yourself.
With this new year, reset.
Because mental health
is health.
Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. Happy Sunday evening, El Paso, Las Cruces, and Ciudad Juarez. I'm Paso County. We are continuing our discussion with 4 of the 5 candidates on the Democrat side who are running for the 2024 El Paso County Sheriff as early voting for primaries continues. And the winner will face off against Republican Minerva Torres Shelton. And let's get right into it with another reminder. Please keep your responses to around 30 to 40 seconds so we can keep things moving along. And as the law enforcement officials on this panel know, not long ago, a man was attacked for 45 minutes and murdered at the El Paso County Jail Annex. The question I pose to everyone here is, if elected, how would you ensure the safety of inmates and detention officers? And Raul Mendiola, let's go ahead and begin with your response to this question.
First of all, the jail has been lacking a lot of responsibility. During 2020-22, there were over 30 inmate custody in death. They were all called natural causes, which I don't think so. In reference to this last one, the lack of supervision by the administrators, the sergeants, and anybody else gave everyone an opportunity to leave that man to pass away after more than 45 minutes and then filed like 12 hours later. We need to make sure that the sergeants that are working the jail are doing more patrolling around the cells and make sure that the officers do visual contact with every inmate every 15 to 30 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Now to Robert Bobby Flores, what would be your priorities for ensuring the safety of all inmates and the safety of El Paso County Sheriff detention officers and staffers?
Well, the Texas Commission on Jail Standards is very specific on what's expected of every detention officer who works in the county jail. And that is that they require a face-to-face contact at least once every hour for general population inmates. Of course, there are special populations where you're going to have to conduct additional inspections, but we need to make sure that we hold our officers accountable to doing that. Additionally, the officers need to be trained before working in the jail. These officers were not trained. They were taken in off the street and they were placed into the cell blocks, and then they were asked to do the job of a detention officer. If you're not adequately trained, you don't know what to look for, you don't know how to look for the anomalies in activity and inmate behavior, and that's a high priority for me.
Thank you. And next we have Ryan Urrutia. How would you work to protect the safety of officers within the El Paso County Jail and, of course, the inmates?
Of course, protection of the inmates is priority in their mental health inmates. When they're in our custody, we need to provide the safety. Right now, we have relocated the devices that we use to monitor our staff when they do their face-to-face checks from the door of the cell block to the interior of the cell block. So that is already occurring, and those assure that they have to go inside the cell block to conduct the face-to-face check and accountability on our employee side. Now, we did see a veteran of 15 years resign during an investigation, and that is important because he knew or she knew the accountability measures that were already in place for their lack of action. The importance of protecting our staff is extremely important, and training is the key to that.
Now let's kick things over to Michael P. Gonzalez. What's the best strategy to keep El Paso County Sheriff staff safe inside the jail in addition to securing inmate safety?
I would say accountability and transparency. We need to do a better job. Our officers need to be better trained. We also have to be able to have our officers do more checks. I know when I worked in the jail, we used to do checks 15, 30 minutes, and everybody was constantly rotating. The people in the guard shack were also making sure that they monitored the people inside of the jail. We had a Duquesne system where if an inmate did have an issue or a problem, they were able to communicate with us, and we also gained that rapport in reference to working with the inmates where they could come to us if they had an issue or a problem, where we were able to come up with the solution at that point, move them out of that cell tank, or assist them in any way that they needed.
Thank you, sir. And I know some of you, we obviously touched on this a bit in this question, but let's continue the conversation a bit more with a follow-up question for everyone to address. After the recent jail murder we spoke about, the report from the state's Oversight Commission found that checks were not done according to standards. Is that a symptom of a larger problem of staffing at the detention center? And if so, what will you do to improve recruitment for both detention officers and, of course, deputies on patrol? And we'll start with Raul Mendiola once again with your answer.
I'd like to review the policies on hiring. There's certain officers that are qualified, or people who are qualified to be detention officers or patrol officers, but one little detail keeps them out, and we need to look at that and bring more officers in. We need to also, like it's been said, we need to train the officers properly, make sure they are working with an FTO prior to being released by themselves. We need to make sure that everyone gets the adequate training, and we need to find ways to get funds to hire more individuals or officers to work those areas.
Now to Bobby Flores, how much is staffing a key issue when looking into preventing violent attacks within the jail annex?
Well, it's certainly a strong issue. Okay, so I ran the jail back in 2014. When I was there in 2014, I had 1,200 inmates and over 333 officers. When I took the jail over again in 2021, I had 1,800 inmates and only 276 officers. So you can see that the staff had been whittled down so much in order to streamline operations that there was invariably going to be some failures in operation. We need to make sure that we have adequate staff in order to assist those inmates during movement, assist those inmates when they need to be taken to the hospitals, and that's one thing that really set us apart. That really made things difficult for us. Additionally, we also lost a gang intel officer, and our gang intel officer position is critical for finding out problems in the jails and letting us know ahead of time.
And Commander Urrutia, what are your thoughts about the State's Oversight Commission report?
You know, accountability is key in this, and what we got to do is, like I said, we've already relocated devices to make sure our staff are doing the checks, are in compliance, you know, and holding them accountable when they fail to do their jobs. You know, these incidents should be prevented at all costs. We are in charge of protecting inmates. We are also in part charge of protecting the public. So being the sheriff is two-faceted. It's a jail operation and patrol operation. So being able to account for both is extremely important, and being able to voice our concerns as leaders, as we need personnel, as we need additional staffing, as we need additional resources to the sheriff is important. And if we don't do that, then we are failing as leaders as well.
And Michael Gonzalez, what would you do for recruitment and retainment of sheriff deputies and law enforcement within the jail annex?
It begins with us. What we need to do is we need to take care of our detention officers a little bit more. We're losing a lot of officers to Border Patrol, U.S. Customs, El Paso PD, and other agencies. I think it's important that we retain our officers. I know that they get the first-hand training which is available to other agencies, which is a great asset to them, but we need to figure a way to be able to retain them, to keep them on board with the Sheriff's Department. If it comes with pay, if it comes with helping them reference to fatigue or reference to issues that they're having, I think that's very important also. I think that there's something that's going on, that there's an issue why we can't retain them. I think we have to figure things out with the 12-hour shifts. We need to be able to allocate things in our resources differently for them.
Thank you, sir. You're watching ABC-7 Extra. Still ahead, we'll give the law enforcement on this panel the chance to pick a question and ask that question of one of their opponents. That and more as we continue this forum with the Democrat candidates for El Paso County Sheriff as the early voting continues. This is ABC-7 Sunday Extra. We'll be right back.
When a rookie stunt driver meets the trainer who thought he'd seen it all. Again. There's bound to be action. But this is no ordinary blockbuster. It's a Nissan sales event ad, so you better act fast. Don't miss out on impressive President's Day savings.
Let's roll.
Now get a low $299 per month lease or get 2.9% APR financing for 60 months on Altima.
Hurry into the Nissan Thrill of the Drive sales event.
Weather, uncorruptible yet mysterious. Its movement determined by the cosmos and nature as indiscriminate as it is life-giving. Here at ABC-7, Doppler Dave Spielman puts his decades of experience to work, observing Mother Nature, studying her science to anticipate her track and craft the most accurate forecast you can trust for your property, your family's safety, and your peace of mind. Doppler Dave Spielman, the Borderlands chief meteorologist.
Rise and shine, El Paso. We've got news for you.
An officer-involved shooting leaves one person in the hospital.
Good Morning El Paso is bringing you team coverage,
including live updates.
This is a residential area, and this is still a very active scene.
With your hour-by-hour future track forecast.
We are under an ABC-7 first alert.
And the most up-to-date traffic track report.
We see traffic reduced to one singular lane. That's where we start to see that back up.
Tune in to Good Morning El Paso, weekdays starting at 4:30 a.m. only on ABC-7.
A young honor student with big plans for her future.
Very special person who wanted to be a psychologist and wanted to help people.
Her life cut short by an ex-boyfriend.
Never any sign of remorse at all.
I'm Stephanie Valle. In my new Borderline Crimes podcast episode, why 18 years later, Jennifer Ann Crescente's family is still fighting for awareness and justice. Keeping a killer incarcerated, Tuesday at 10, only on ABC-7. Sponsored by University Medical Center.
Welcome back to ABC-7 Extra. Happy Sunday evening, El Paso, Las Cruces, and Ciudad Juarez. I'm Paul Cicala. We're continuing our discussion with 4 of the 5 candidates on the Democrat side who are running for the 2024 El Paso County Sheriff. And if you just joined us, I want to reiterate that because of campaign commitments, the candidate Oscar Ugarte was unable to make it to this forum. We provided a statement from him earlier in our show, and you can check it out again on kvia.com, including this entire show. And quickly, we'll now allow the candidates to ask a question of another candidate. Just want to reiterate to everyone on the panel to please be cordial and limit the question to no longer than 20 seconds on this one, and the response to no longer than 30 seconds. And now, Raul Mendiola, who would you like to throw out a question to? Which candidate, and what would you like to say?
I'd like to throw it out to Mr. Urrutia. Mr. Urrutia, when I was growing up, my parents will tell us, if you're in trouble, you need help, you go to a policeman. What are you going to do? What have you done to keep that going? Because we haven't seen it here lately.
So, Mr. Mendiola, that's a great question. I'm in charge of our school resource officers, and we have a heavy commitment to the youth in our community. We operate what's called the Back on Track program, where we identify at-risk kids with our school districts and bring them in for summer programs to have positive interactions with law enforcement, but also to recover credits to graduate on time to be back on track. So these initiatives are extremely important, have been ongoing during my time as your patrol commander, and will continue and expand when I'm elected as your sheriff.
All right, thank you, sir. Let's continue with Robert Bobby Flores. What question would you like to present, and to what candidate?
I'll ask Commander Urrutia as well. So when I was criminal investigations commander, we opened up an investigation regarding our contracted wrecker service. There was video evidence there of some thefts that had been occurring amongst our community. And once I transferred out of there and got promoted to assistant chief, these investigations were inactivated. Can you explain that?
Well, I think that's really a question you need to answer, because I was not in charge of criminal investigations, so I had no footprint on those types of cases. That was your investigation in your division, so I can't answer that because I have no knowledge of the closure or why they were closed.
Hey, and finally, Ryan Urrutia, not finally, but next, you've been answering questions all throughout this segment, so would you like to ask someone else a question?
I do, Mr. Flores, I have a question. I have a copy of an internal affairs letter where you had a relationship with a subordinate's wife. How do you ensure that the community and our employees will not be affected by this type of situation again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was a dating relationship. I was a single person back then, and she did not disclose that she had a husband as well. And in fact, the investigation showed that there was no marriage. Even when the investigation was ongoing, there was a series of evidence that showed that she never disclosed any of that. Even Sheriff Wiles, when the case was disposed, said he didn't believe that the elements were met there for fraternization. However, in the interest of the disciplinary matrix, that the letter was going to be issued.
And now, candidate Michael P. Gonzalez, do you have a question for one of the other members of law enforcement on this panel?
My question actually was for Oscar Ugarte, who's not here right now. Oscar Ugarte, he may be an elected official, but he manages a organization of 4 officers and also a staffing, I think, of about 12 or 13. My question was going to be in reference to mental health. How many mental health have they handled? And also in reference to the social group that they were going to create, have they already created that with the constable's office? That was my question for him, but since he's not here, he won't be able to answer that. So.
Well, now that Mr. Ugarte isn't here, how would you answer that question? What would you think would be the solution?
I think we need to put people, in reference to that, I think that creating another social service group is going to tie up taxpayer money. I really think that we have enough organizations with our deputies and with crisis intervention teams with emergence that we're able to handle those situations. I think handling what we're doing right now, I said we need to develop more, we need to train our officers more, we need to give them more experience in reference to dealing with situations with emergence, with crisis intervention teams. We need to have a rotating TDY assignment where each officer is able to ride along with those crisis intervention teams and learn from different organizations.
Thank you so much for that. Once again, we want to thank everyone on this panel for taking the time to join us, and thank you at home also for taking the time to listen in. It is your voice and your vote. El Paso voters can continue to take part in the Democrat and Republican primary elections. That's a reminder. As mentioned, this, of course, will determine the candidates that will move forward to the November general election. Once again, Democrat voters will choose their nominee for the El Paso County Sheriff to compete against unopposed Republican Minerva Torres Shelton. And those Democrat candidates, once again, are Raul Mendiola, Robert Bobby Flores, Ryan Urrutia, Oscar Ugarte, and Michael P. Gonzalez. And once again, we'd like to thank every candidate again for making it here today to our studios at ABC-7. Also, a big thank you to all of our law enforcement friends in the region for your service, and it's definitely appreciated by us here at ABC-7 and all throughout the borderland. And at home, thank you once again for joining us. I'm Paul Cicala, and this has been ABC-7 Extra. Have a positive, productive week filled with lots of joy, and don't forget to get on out there and vote. Good night.